No way, says May. The Prime Minister won't interfere with David Cameron's controversial honours list. Labour's accused the former Prime Minister of planning to reward his friends with OBEs and MBEs, saying it's the worst of the old boys network.
Most reasonable people would say it's unacceptable to give Mrs Cameron's stylist an OBE and to hand out knighthoods to members of Parliament like confetti.
Also this lunchtime, life after cancer, how survivors can suffer for years after treatment and why few are warned. The UK's terror threat, police say they're tracking thousands of potential terrorists right now. And even if Rio isn't quite ready, Team GB has arrived at a top-notch training camp in Brazil.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hussain.
Good afternoon. The Prime Minister won't intervene in the official process of David Cameron's resignation honours list because Downing Street says it would set a very bad precedent. Following a leak of the list, the former Prime Minister has been criticised for wanting to reward politicians who lost the EU referendum, donors, aides and even his wife's stylist. Labour says rewarding friends on such a huge scale brings the whole honours system into disrepute and undermines Theresa May's reputation. Richard Pallow has the row and the reaction.
And I want to thank everyone who's given so much support to me personally over these years.
A show of appreciation on leaving Downing Street that troubled no one. But just how many of them, and in particular who, David Cameron is now trying to reward, is leading to calls for an entire overhaul of the system. More than 40 of his allies are in his resignation honours list. Cameron's sidekick in government, former Chancellor George Osborne, is set to become a Companion of Honour. His replacement, Philip Hammond, is nominated for a knighthood, as is Andrew Cook, one of several donors controversially rewarded for giving money to the Conservatives. There's an OBE for Samantha Cameron's stylist, ISABEL SPEARMAN, while Jack Straw's son Will is due a CBE for leading the Stronger In campaign, which of course ultimately failed.
I think people will be shocked at the scale and size of this list. You know, there's a reasonableness test that should be applied to these lists, and I think most reasonable people would say it's unacceptable to give Mrs Cameron's stylist an OBE and to hand out knighthoods to members of Parliament like confetti.
As for the current occupant of number 10, well, she says that she doesn't want to get involved in the wishes of her predecessor. A spokesman for Theresa May saying it would set a very bad precedent for a new Prime Minister to interfere in the official processes. And ultimately, an honours committee will have to approve every one of them. Vince Cable was a beneficiary of Nick Clegg's thank you list. The former business secretary, now of course Sir Vince, unsurprisingly backs the status quo, up to a point.
We're in a world where people at the moment are very cynical about politics and politicians, and I think former Prime Ministers need to be careful, therefore, about what they do. I think there are two major problems. One is giving honours to party donors, given a lot of money, and I think that rather exposes the rottenness of our system.
Cameron is far from the first Prime Minister to depart amid such accusations of cronyism. And for the moment, this extensive repayment of political debt is set to continue. Richard Pallow, ITV News, Westminster.
Our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Shipp, is at Downing Street this lunchtime. Chris, what do you make of Mr Cameron's list?
Well, Nina, I think now that number 10 have said that Theresa May will not get involved in her predecessor's honours list, it rather suggests that it will now go ahead as reported, of course, except if any of the individuals on that list fail to pass certain committees or fail to be vetted. And that means that George Osborne could perhaps become one of a very select member of a group called the Companion of Honours. There are only 65 others at any one time. They include people like Professor Stephen Hawking, awarded for his theories on relativity and whether or not there is radiation emitted from black holes. Now, you could argue Is George Osborne's achievement on a par with that or not? And I'll let you decide what you think. However, I think the more controversial appointments are those that include the press secretaries and members of staff around him. If that goes ahead, and I think that will be very controversial indeed, but we are talking here about an honours system. If you're going to have an honours system, I think it is going to be controversial, and that's exactly what we're seeing here.
Chris Ship, thank you. Next, the good news on cancer. Survival rates are getting better and better. And then the bad. Research from the charity Macmillan Cancer Support says many of those survivors live with long-term side effects which they're not warned about and which put extra pressure on the NHS. From depression to physical problems to losing jobs and homes, Macmillan is now asking for more acknowledgement and support for the hidden cost of cancer. Sally Lockwood has the details.
It's 30 years since Jean McFarlane was diagnosed with breast cancer. For many people in the 70s and 80s, that news felt like a death sentence. But like Jean, more than 170,000 cancer patients from that era are still alive today, despite many fearing the worst at the time.
The treatment was enormous and frightening at times, and I often wondered what on earth was sort of happening to me because I couldn't breathe. And I also found that I'd never been a phobic person, but the claustrophobia, I mean, I had panic attacks and I wouldn't go in a lift because I felt I was going to be trapped.
Despite the improved survival rates, many cancer patients face long-term consequences. More than 600,000 face poor health or disability after cancer treatment. Even after 40 years, more than 40,000 patients are still dealing with the consequences of their treatment. And last year, more than 100,000 patients in England said they weren't warned of the full side effects.
And what we need to do is make sure that we reduce these side effects. Every cancer treatment will have side effects, but we need to make them as small and as few as possible so that more people survive their disease and do it with a good quality of life afterwards.
There are also still a number of cancers where survival rates are lagging behind, such as brain tumours, pancreatic cancer and lung cancer.
Well, research like this has made huge leaps in terms of improving cancer survival rates. The number of people living with cancer is expected to increase by 1.5 million by 2030. And with increasing pressures on the NHS, there's concern about how the healthcare system will cope.
And helping the growing number of survivors to cope after cancer has become a priority.
Say the big things are I can't drive. Your immune system is shot by the chemotherapy, so you get everything going.
Cancer treatment has come a long way, but it's hoped generations to come will have an easier journey. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Sarah Johnson, who was diagnosed with thyroid cancer last December, and by Linda Thomas, the Chief Executive of Macmillan Cancer Support. Thank you, ladies, both for coming in. Sarah, if I can start with you, your diagnosis and treatment happened very quickly. Yeah. And then very quickly after that, you, like many, many others, suffered from depression. What was that like? Did you know that could have happened?
It kind of hit me all at once when I came back to London after resting in Glasgow for 2 months, and I realised that I wasn't okay mentally because I was just upset. Nobody really understood because with thyroid cancer you're kind of in and out. They say it's the best kind of cancer to have. So you have people look at you and they think, oh, well, you're not well, oh, you're well now, that's you're fine, but you're still having hot flushes every day, you hurt all over, you're still trying to get your level thyroxine correct, and nobody really understood that, and they just assumed that I'd be fine to get back to work and whatnot.
When you've had the bad news of cancer and then you've had the good news that the treatment is working, there are people who just expect you to be really happy about that, which must be hard then to say, actually, this is what I'm going through now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I got diagnosed with cancer, I had a cry and I just got on with it. And then when you stop and you need to get back to life and you think, right, oh, that's me better, it's hard to acknowledge that you can still be ill but in a different way, and it's a natural response. And Macmillan really helped me with that. I used an online community, which I still go on to now even though I'm better, just to make sure that I can help anybody else that's having the same issues with me. And I used the Macmillan helpline a lot. They have a thyroid specialist, Nurse Jerry, who was really helpful.
When people don't have access, like Sarah, to Macmillan, what do you want as an overall package from the NHS? Because we're talking about depression, we're talking about unexpected long-term health problems, side effects going on, financial problems as well. What can the NHS do to warn people and then to help them?
Well, I guess what we want and what the report's highlighting today is that the story of cancer is changing, and it's a good news story because people are living longer, but there's also some real hidden side effects as well that often don't get talked about. Sarah's story is very common. People leave treatment and everyone expects them to be happy and jolly and almost throw a party, but they can be left with a whole host of different things.
What do you want? I'm sorry to rush you. What are you calling for today?
So what we're asking today is for every single cancer patient to know exactly what is going to happen for them and to have a personal package of care, whether that be from the NHS or from an organisation like Macmillan. As Sarah said, we offer an awful lot, so we'd like to make sure that cancer patients are able to access all of that.
Linda and Sarah, thank you so much for coming in to talk to me. Thank you. The man in charge of policing terror in the UK has told ITV News his officers are tracking thousands of suspects. Mark Rowley's comments come after his boss suggested yesterday another attack in this country had become a case of when, not if. And as Jenny Longden explains, he says we all need to play a part in stopping another atrocity here.
Armed police remain on high alert in London as a terror attack on UK soil is deemed highly likely, with the UK's top officer saying it's a case of when, not if. Today, the man in charge of anti-terror confirmed they are continually faced with a possible attack.
At any one time, we've got several thousand people that we're concerned about to a degree. At the top of that pyramid are the highest risk operations. Those high-risk operations are sometimes people who are planning and moving towards attacks.
The latest threat is so-called lone wolves carrying out atrocities like the attack in Nice, where one man drove a lorry into crowds of people at a public event.
Police say up to 70 cases are being resolved per month, and 1 in 6 of those are being brought in by members of the public. But with an increase in lone wolf attacks across Europe, they say it's more difficult to tell when or where an attack might happen or by whom.
The public make more than 3,500 contributions to stopping terrorism every single day, and in some cases they've been vital to helping police disrupt plots.
It may be they've been on our radar and there's a bit of intelligence, or it may be someone in the community or a friend or a relative had half a sign that they were gravitating towards extremism and terrorism. So between us, I think there is no attack which is inevitable.
Their message to the public is to report any suspicions, as it may well save hundreds of lives. Jenny Longden, ITV News.
A man who tried to behead a fellow passenger at a tube station in London has been sentenced to life in prison. Somali-born Muhyiddin Mira, who has schizophrenia, targeted strangers at random at a ticket hall in Leytonstone station last December. The incident was caught on CCTV and mobile phone footage. One onlooker at the time shouted, "You ain't no Muslim, bruv," after the 30-year-old declared he was going to spill blood for his Syrian brothers. And a 12-year-old has appeared in court charged with the murder of a man in Greater Manchester. The youngster, along with 3 teenagers, was arrested over the weekend over the death of Bradley Moore. The father of 4 was assaulted outside a shopping centre in Ashton-under-Lyne on Wednesday. An Australian family living in the Highlands have until midnight tonight to secure a visa extension or be deported. KATHRYN and GREGG Brain and their 7-year-old son Lachlan have been in Scotland for 5 years, but the conditions of the visa they came on have changed, so they've been told they must leave. Peter Smith is with the Brain family this lunchtime. Peter.
That's right. Well, it was 6 years ago that the Brain family answered the call. At that time, there was a Scottish Government initiative backed by the Home Office for families around the world with Scottish ancestry, encouraging them to come to the Highlands and study here. The Brain family did that. The promise at that time was they would be given 2 years after finishing studies to get a job, to work here, to get experience. After they arrived, that scheme was withdrawn. They then found themselves in the situation that KATHRYN, who was studying here, had a matter of months. Not only did she have to get a job, it had to be a certain degree of paying job, and also her employer would have to pay £2,000 to sponsor her for a new visa. I'm joined by the family now, so Kathryn, tell me, what's at stake for your family?
Well, it's been a 10-year dream to even get to here. Greg and I came in 2001, and we could not think of anywhere else that we wanted to live other than the Highlands. And that scheme that you referred to is what was our answer to our prayers to be able to get over here. Both of us, our great-grandparents, the last ones born here, so we couldn't get an ancestral visa, so that was our only way.
The rules have changed. Some people would say you just have to go with them because these are the rules. Immigration is important to many people, and you have to then follow them. If you don't have a job to stay here, you have to go home.
It's a good question. We did follow the rules. What we were told was that if we came over here and studied for 4 years, that there would be this 2-year post-study work visa here. We sold up everything we had, came here, only to be told after we'd committed to it that the rules had changed. It's just a matter of natural justice to be asking for the UK government just to simply do what they said.
OK, thank you very much. Well, as you said, the Brain family have until midnight tonight either to get a job or to have another extension to try and give them more time to find employment here and allow the family to stay.
Peter Smith, thank you. Now, is Rio ready for the Olympics? There's certainly signs the Olympic city is not quite there yet, but in another part of Brazil, Team GB has arrived to its training base where the British athletes are being treated to some of the best facilities in town. Our reporter Amy Lewis spent the weekend at the Team GB training camp in Belo Horizonte, 270 miles north of Rio. We were hoping to speak to her just now, but I'm just being told that she's disappeared. We'll try to get back to that story when we can. Instead, from today, visitors will be able to enjoy even more of the Lake District and Yorkshire Dales. For the first time, the area's boundaries have been broadened. The parks have grown by a total of 188 square miles, creating a band of protected land across northern England. Our correspondent Damon Green is in the village of Orton in Cumbria, where they're actually celebrating Yorkshire Day today. Damon, what's behind these changes?
Well, this is Orton in Cumbria, a pretty picture book village in the north of the country, but for 60 years it's been halfway between the national parks of the Yorkshire Dales and the national park of the Lake District. But from today it's now part of the national park of the Yorkshire Dales, with the news that it's been expanded. 161 square miles of upland country has been added to the national park, and that includes this village. Now, the villagers behind me are learning about it in the village hall, and Kathryn Beardsmore from the Yorkshire Dales National Park is with me. What is this all about?
Well, National Park basically has two purposes. One is to conserve the landscape and scenic beauty, and the other is to promote the understanding and enjoyment of the area. Really, what National Park designation says is that this area meets both those criteria, and from a government point of view, it recognises the importance of the area and helps in terms of resourcing. And for me, that's got to be good news for this area.
So what are you trying to persuade the people? They may be concerned, but this is a good thing for them, isn't it?
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, some people may be concerned about planning, but the planning policies we're going to be applying are those of South Lakeland and Eden anyway. In terms of the economy, it's the fact that the visitor economy can benefit. People can say that they're in a national park, they can use our branding and their own marketing material and just promote the wonderful place that it is for people to come and visit and enjoy.
Well, it is indeed a very wonderful place. That's the reason why people come here. The nature will be protected, the buildings will be protected, and although there may be news of more visitors here, it can only be good news for the economy of a rural place.
OK, Damon Green in Cumbria, thank you. Let's go back to Brazil now and join our sports reporter, Amy Lewis. You've been touring the Team GB facilities. What are they like?
Well, they're pretty impressive, Nina. 200 of the 366 athletes that make up Team GB will use them before they arrive here in Rio. There actually is the only indoor 50-metre swimming pool outside of Rio. As well, there's an athletics track that the athletes can use, and as well there's medical departments that we were shown and given a tour of to show how seriously they're being taken by Team GB. And all of the equipment has been shipped over from Britain, so it's a home-for-home experience for the athletes. Team GB say it is the biggest and best preparation camp there's ever been for an Olympic team, and that was backed up by the British swimmers that I caught up with.
The facilities for us here have been second to none, and the accommodation for us and everything has just been unbelievable so far.
We've got the actual only indoor 50-metre pool in Brazil, so we've managed to get that as part of Team GB, and we're only a 45-minute flight away from Rio, so we can just hop in on Tuesday into the village.
Amy, you're back in Rio now. Is that city ready for the opening ceremony this Friday?
Well, Nina, the venues behind me are all ready for the sports, but there has been an issue just up the road for the sailing. Yesterday, one of the ramps collapsed there because of the heavy winds that were here. But generally, the major issue is the infrastructure around the park and getting here. Transport will be an issue. The subway getting here from the city, which is going to be used by 300,000 people a day, has been massively delayed, although that is expected to be opened later. But just going around the roads, it takes hours to get anywhere. So it's going to be the infrastructure more than the actual venues themselves where the issues are.
Amy, thank you. Finally, this lunchtime, the verdict on one of the most long-awaited books in a decade. The 8th instalment of the Harry Potter story went on sale yesterday. It's actually a script for the play rather than a novel this time, but it hasn't stopped fans speed reading J.K. Rowling's latest offering. So what did they make of it? Sally Biddulph has been finding out.
Such is the draw of Harry Potter, fans queued at midnight to get their hands on the first copies of the latest instalment. And if the book of the play was this exciting, imagine what the stage show meant to fans.
It's not like a musical, it's not like a kind of Shakespeare, it's just completely different and it's brilliant.
We first met the boy wizard in 1997 in J.K. Rowling's first book. A film 4 years later confirming Harry Potter as a global phenomenon. Toby Lestrange wasn't even born then, but at 10 he is one of Potter's biggest fans, and to prove it he sped read the new book in just 59 minutes.
I thought it was absolutely amazing. The storyline was epic and very, very good ideas.
And even the challenges of reading a play didn't throw him off course.
It slowed you down a bit because some of the time you just couldn't understand it by the words. You had to look at the beginning of the line to work out who was speaking, because of course the whole story is told in dialogue.
Toby's grandma taught him to speed read, a skill she sees is giving her grandson options to unlock the world of books.
The whole point with children is that they really enjoy the story and they get into it, and we're both now reading the story a little bit more slowly so that we really can enjoy it, because it's really worth it. But speed reading is really important for when he's a bit older. So when he goes to university, I promised him that he'll be able to read his 30 books a week and party more.
Harry Potter may well still have millions under his spell, but this little boy's talent is magic.
Expecto Patronum!
Sally Biddulph, ITV News.
That's it this lunchtime. Mark Austin and Mary Nightingale will be here with the ITV Evening News. From everyone here right now, bye-bye.